Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a further game from the Carlsen Firouzja Bullet Marathon that was played, well, it's some 2 weeks ago now, on April the 4th. And at the time of this is game number 141. It's 1 minute chess, in case you didn't realise. That's what bullet chess is, 1 minute each for the players. And at the time of the game, Carlsen was trailing by 15 points. Magnus is, of course, the world champion. And Alireza Firouzja is only 16 years old, and in classical chess is ranked 21st at the moment. So in this game, Magnus opened d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop to g7, and e4. So this is a King's Indian defense, which was Firouzja's preferred variation during the match against d4. So we had d6 and now knight f3 and castles for black. Okay, I've sort of included this game for a couple of reasons. One is Magnus's next move, which was a mouse slip, and also because the remainder of the game is actually sort of an instructive endgame. So it's a couple of reasons why. So the mouse slip was king e2. What Magnus, of course, meant to play was bishop e2, which he'd played in other games, and then Firouzja played e5, and they contested that position many times throughout the match. But Magnus unfortunately touched the king instead, so we had e5. He's got no choice but to play the king back really, and then try and develop. But of course he's effectively given black two moves here. So we had e takes d4, knight takes d4, rook e8 straight away. It's targeting the pawn, and we have to remember, although the king and rook look as if they're on the starting squares, well, the king is, but it's no longer able to castle because the king has moved. So we had f3 because it's got to protect the e4 pawn, and Firouzja played d5 straight away, opening things up. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and now Magnus played actually a really strong move, which is very hard to see, but because after all it's a retreating move, and he's got to recover in a way from the shock of the move that he played, king e2. But now the idea is that we're now threatening the knight with either the pawn or the knight, and if the knight moves, then we can trade off queens, and that's what happens in the game. Now, Firouzja could have kept the queens on with queen h4 check, g3, and now capture, because then if white takes, then at least black has made a mess of white's kingside pawns. But in the game we had knight c3. Magnus snapped the queens off, queen d8, rook d8, and now knight takes c3. So white has achieved something already. When you think about what was happening after 6, king e2, Magnus has managed to swap the queens off, and so he's got chances to survive now. We had knight c6, bishop to e3, and now knight b4. Rook c1, preventing the knight fork, which was threatened, which would have fought the king and rook. And we had c6 from Firouzja, a3, and now knight d3 check. Bishop takes d3, and rook d3, and now king e2, attacking the rook with gain of time. Rook back to d8, and now rook hd1. So white's not doing at all badly now, and black has got the bishop pair, which is generally thought to be favourable in an open position, to have the bishop pair against the bishop and knight. But it also leads in development, so it sort of outweighs it a little bit really. And we had bishop e6, which is a mistake. As it turns out, white can now win a pawn, which Carlsen did. Rook takes d8, rook takes d8, and now bishop takes the loose pawn on a7. So we had bishop c4 check, king e1, and the bishop h6 attacking the rook. So black's got a lot of activity for the pawn, which often happens when you've lost a pawn. You tend to get some activity in return. And then we had rook d1, offering a trade of rooks, which Firouzja accepted. Rook d1, knight takes d1, and now f5. trying to reduce the number of pawns on the board. So we had bishop e3. So one of white's wishes is to trade off black's bishop pair like this. We had bishop to g7 and ef5, gf5, and now king d2 developing the king. King f7, bishop to f4, now bishop to d4, and now knight e3. So black has a choice now. We can either trade off the bishop for knight, and then we have opposite coloured bishops on the board, or because white is threatening both the bishop and the pawn, of course, or to play bishop here, defending the pawn. And Firouzja chose the former. He played the opposite colour bishop endgame with bishop e3 check, bishop e3, and now king e6. Bishop f4 from Carlsen, bishop f1, attacking the g2 pawn, g3, and bishop back to c4. King e3, bishop to d5, bishop to c7, and king f7, and bishop to a5, king g6, and bishop back to c3. So the bishop now is now covering squares, which the black king would like to abuse. So it's limiting the black king's activity. King f7, king to f4, bringing the king up, king to g6, and now g4. Because without playing g4, white's unable to make any progress really, because the bishop is attacking the pawn. And I mean, just to be clear, a move like b4 doesn't help at all, because b5 simply locks down the queen side, and then there's nothing at all that white can then do to try and win. So we had g4, fg4, f takes g4, and now h5, not waiting around for white to advance. Firouzja sort of tries to simplify with h5. So Carlsen takes the opportunity to create a passed pawn with g5, h4. So white has achieved a big aim in the position. He's got himself a passed pawn in the endgame now. But as long as black can, safely hang on to these two pawns over here, he won't be in any danger of losing. So we'll see what happens in the game. We had king to g4, first provoking the pawn to advance, which it has to do that, otherwise it can be captured. h3, and now bishop d2, protecting the g5 pawn. That frees the king to try and go over to the queen side. So we had bishop e6 and king f4. Yeah, so it's amazing to think that after Magnus's king slip, he's only spent about 24 seconds on the clock altogether, and he's actually reached a favourable endgame. Whereas for Alireza, this psychologically is very difficult to defend. If he'd been worse throughout the game, say, and then was defending this, somehow it's psychologically easier to handle. But he knows what happened in the beginning of the game. He was just given 2 free moves, really, and yet here he is trying to hang on in a pawn down endgame. So he played bishop to d5, and now king e5. But it does turn out that bishop d5 is probably a losing move after Carlsen's very strong sequence, which he, like I say, rattled it off without thinking. He just saw a winning plan. But if black had played this move instead, c5, he seems to be able to sort of build a fortress after king here, bishop f7, king d6, and then the move c4. And now black can safely defend either of these pawns with his bishop if they're attacked. For example, if king c7, bishop d5, and there's no way now, and white can play a4, say, and then black just waits, a5. Black waits again, but there's no way for white to create a passed pawn here. No way for white to win either this pawn or this one. But in the game after bishop d5, it appears that he's not able to advance the pawn to c5, and Carlsen prevents that from happening. He goes king e5, bishop g2, king to d6, and bishop back to d5. So in that sequence, there's still no way to play c5 without losing the pawn. Now king c7. Now here you can almost play c5, but not quite, because king d6 attacks the bishop, and then we can take the pawn and then create a passed pawn. So we had Firouzja had to play b5 instead, and now king b6, and now king h5, king c5, king g6, king back to b4. So Carlsen has successfully stopped Firouzja from getting an ideal pawn setup, and he's now about to create a passed pawn. After king h5, he played b3, and now bishop e4, and now a4, creating this outside passed pawn. So if black tries to play this, of course white doesn't take, because then this is the point. He can just defend that pawn with the bishop, and then the king just sits on g6, and the bishop moves backwards and forwards all day long, and it's a draw. But instead of that, of course, white plays after a4, after bishop d3, white plays the move a5, and then just creates a passed pawn, and that will win the game. So in the game, we had b takes a4, b takes a4, bishop to d3, and now a5. And now there's no answer to white's plan. Once white wins the bishop for the pawn, it's an easy win. The bishop can stop this pawn, can easily do it from where it is on this diagonal, and then white will just gradually bring his king across to the king side and queen the pawn. So in this position, Firouzja had no choice but to resign. So I hope you enjoyed that. It was interesting from 2 points of view. Like I said, I found it interesting. I was watching the game live, and it was a shock to see king e2, even though, to be fair, Magnus, he was made a few mouse slips throughout the match, and some of them where he put his queen on pre, which made a big difference, of course, to the overall score. But in this particular game, king e2 wasn't fatal, and incredibly, he spent less than 30 seconds to play the rest of the game, and perhaps psychologically, from Alireza's point of view, it's not so easy when you see your opponent gradually getting back into the game after such a start. But I think that's fairly typical of bullet chess. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that and at least found the endgame instructive as I did. And thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe or like if you enjoyed the video. Bye now.